Hey everyone, Carl Carpenter here. Just wanted to have a quick conversation about something that's kind of been a topic lately amongst the MSP community or IT practitioners in general that offer their services, and that's liability, specifically MSP liability or consultant liability. So I'm going to talk a lot about BCDR, just so you know, but we'll talk about some other things as well in relation to liability. So, in my experiences in running across various clients that had to deal with other companies or other MSPs or whatever, there's certainly a tremendous amount of occurrences where MSPs or consultants were offering their services under the intentions of, providing good service for a good price, with good intentions behind it in order to help the client. And that, while the intentions are one thing, the potential for negative outcomes, regardless of the intentions, are something else entirely. So for example, I have a client right now at this very moment that has an MSP that is performing patching for them, operating system level patching, which is great because that's a requirement, right? The only problem is that all regulations require all forms of patching, not operating system level patching, but all forms of patching. And this vendor does not do third-party patching. So, like Adobe Reader, they don't patch that, but they will release the latest Windows update or whatever. But I remember, certainly as a cybersecurity professional dealing with viruses, vulnerabilities, hacking attempts, and everything else. I remember distinctly when Adobe Reader and Adobe Flash, well, specifically Adobe Flash, was the most vulnerable product around. And while it's great that a company is offering patching, if you're not doing third-party patching as well, that is an issue. That is not regulatory compliant. So, and the reason I bring this up is because MSPs can be making, quite a bit of mistakes in relation to how they offer their services. So if an MSP is offering services and relating to patching, but not doing all forms of patching, then they're not really doing patching that's going to meet the regulatory requirements. The other aspect that I've run across with MSPs is how they word their contracts. Like they use words like guarantee or zero risk or all in one, things like that. And while that's a great sales tactic to use those terms to hopefully get clients based on that, there is liability to that. The very second you use the word guarantee, I guarantee I will patch your systems, um, then you are guaranteeing it. That means you accept all responsibility as an MSP. And there are clients out there that go on the basically the belief that they're completely covered. So the problem with that is that if an MSP or a consultant or an IT company in general says, I guarantee anything, or there's zero risk of you doing this, but then anything happens and there's any sort of outcome of that, then you have that, that individual or that entity has some issues. Because it can be viewed as definitive and absolute. Even worse is when it's put in an email. So guaranteeing anything is something that should not be in any sort of contract, any sort of language, at all, because you absolutely don't want to give the client that you're going to take on 100% of the risk. As an MSP or a consultant or an IT company providing services, you should tell the client completely, I'm 100% responsible for making this happen, but I'm not 100% accountable. Responsible and accountable are two different things. Responsible means that somebody will do the job. Accountable means that somebody will go to jail for not doing the job. So it's important to understand that. It's important to make sure your clients understand that as well. So another way of looking at it, just if we were to change the scenario a little bit, let's say somebody came up to me and said, if you invest $1,000 in something, I guarantee that your money will be tripled. I would love for somebody to tell me that. I would simply tell them, okay, offer me that exact same thing in writing, put it in writing, sign it, and put down the timeline. So if I'm going to have my money tripled in 1 year, put down, I guarantee that I will have my money tripled in 1 year. And at the end of 1 year, if I invested $3,000 or $1,000 and I don't have $3,000, the person guaranteed it. And what that means is that I could then sue them, or I could say, hey, look, you guaranteed this. So now we have a breach of contract because you guaranteed it. And I could say possibly, hey, you now owe me whatever the difference is because you guaranteed it. And the same thing applies with MSPs or IT consultants or anything like that. If you guarantee something, you have to be able to support that something. If you can't truly support it, or even 99% support it, then you absolutely shouldn't. So that's super important to understand. Now, here's the other aspect. So what could happen out of all that? What could happen about the liability of an MSP when they oversell something and they underperform or whatever? First thing that everybody should know is that the client can actually sue the MSP, the consultant, the IT company, things like that. And in most cases, lawsuits result in 3 times the damages of whatever the damages are. So if it's $100, you could sue up to 3 times, so $300. And then there could be other aspects to that, as well. Now, if the client had some sort of insurance that, they had cybersecurity insurance or of whatever, they could file a claim. Another aspect that could happen is that they could get their claim met by the cyber insurance company, but then the cyber insurance company itself could sue the MSP because they, again, guaranteed it. So we have the client who fully believed that the guarantee was legitimate, safe, it was a good business decision, things like that, but the MSP IT company didn't fulfill their obligations, so they filed a claim. Well, now that insurance company can go after the IT company, basically because they didn't do what they say they were going to do. You see this all the time in insurance in relation to car accidents. My wife has had 2 wrecks where she did not it did not work out in her favor because the other insurance company basically said, well, you didn't have full insurance on your car. So because you didn't have full insurance on your car and because our client crashed into your car, we're not going to pay out the rest of the insurance. And they got away with it twice. So it's kind of crazy. Needless to say, we have full insurance on everything now. Anyway, so the point of the matter of all this is that it's super important that the MSPs, IT companies, consulting companies, things like that, understand their liability and how they present things. So there has been an argument. Let's say the salesperson for a company says, I guarantee all day long, verbally, through email, things like that. And then the actual contract that is, between the client and the consulting company or the MSP company, the actual contract doesn't say that. In court, that still will not hold up for an MSP IT company. There has been cases where they pulled emails where the client was able to show considerably that the cybersecurity company, the consulting company, the IT company, MSP company, whatever, that they repeatedly in email said, I guarantee, and definitively gave the impression to the client that they were fully covered in all cases. So it's kind of super important to understand this. And there has been cases. So I recently I read an article by this cat named Mike Simmel, who spams me all the time in my email. But he gave a really good example in an article he wrote. Basically, there's an MSP company called Involta that was sued by their client. because the Involta sales team told their client that Involta was a one-stop shop for IT. And the Involta website said, and I quote, "There would be no need for any other service providers for any purpose. Let your staff focus on innovation and business-oriented tasks." That's great sales right there. The problem is Involta could not live up to it. In the end, Involta lost. And you never want to lose lawsuits. That's not a good thing. So because of the fact of the way Involta was advertising and so on, and because of the way they basically presented themselves when they could not fully meet the obligations of the that the customer expected, because of that, there was a lawsuit and Involta lost. And it's actually a really good article. If you want to do a Google search for Mike Semel, it's Mike, Semel, and then Involta is Involta. It's actually a really good article. It's very accurate. I've never met Mike personally, but it is what it is. I think the article's good, and he and I are certainly on the same page in relation to this. So this is why that brings me to my point, and why you see, right over here, business continuity and disaster recovery, because I've seen repeatedly amongst the MSP community that there are various packages that are being sold to clients that are basically advertising BCDR solutions. And, I could list off numerous technology. Datto's one, Axient's another. Depending on how you configure it, even Box could be viewed as a BCDR, or other things. So those are not BCDR solutions. What they are is tools to support a BCDR solution. And I bring that up because I wanted to make sure that some of the MSPs out there, that they fully understand, what they're saying and how they're saying it. Now, I've also run across cases where MSPs have said, well, we sell XYZ BCDR solution because it's easy, it's safe, it's reliable, whatever. And great, I love it. That's a great idea. You should do that. You should sell it. The problem is how you're selling it and how you're selling it to your clients. You can't do that. Selling a tool to a client under the pretense that it's a BCDR solution is not going to help you if you ever get caught or go to court. Simply because tools are not a solution. They are a tool that is in support of a solution. Regardless, it is what it is. So let's just bring up some of these actual federal definitions and so on, so you can understand what it looks like. So here is from Tech Target. What is BCDR, Business Continuity Disaster Recovery Guide, things like that. The important part about all of this is that this is just the first case, is what we see when we look at this. And I'm going to point out some federal guidelines and so on. So planning documents, the cornerstone of effective BCDR strategy, resource management, emergency employee contact list, things like that, vent instructions for performing tests. These are all the cornerstone of effective BCDR strategy. So if somebody was to tell me, for example, and I actually did have this happen, if somebody was to tell me Datto is a single source of a BCDR solution, I would ask them, okay, if the CEO has a heart attack and he's the critical signer on a contract to further the business, how is Datto going to prevent that heart attack from happening? Generally, I get no response to that. So that's just an example of BCDR. And this is, you can look this up yourself. This is Tech Target right here. You can, figure it out, see on your own. But a holistic, and I'm just reading this right now, holistic BCDR approach is through planning. I don't know why I can't do that. Through planning and preparation. We have BIAs, things like that. By the way, we have a separate video on BIAs and BCDR in much more detail that goes, that might be interesting to other people. Planning documents, cornerstone, things like that. But if we were to look at other documents, like here is the from the FDIC, business continuity planning is a process where financial ensure the yada yada yada, such as natural disasters, technological failures, human error, or terrorism. So once again, while various BCDR tools like Datto, Axion, or any of the other tools, and by the way, they are great tools. I highly suggest that you continue selling them, continue using them, offer them, things like that. They are not a single solution for BCDR. So and just so you know, I'm looking over here on this screen to read this web page that you see. So the important part about this is to understand that BCDR is much more than just a tool. It is now. Having said that, BCDR is a requirement in virtually every single platform or every single regulatory environment there is. So as an MSP, I would encourage you to not only sell the tool like Datto or Axion, because you should, but I would also encourage you to sell everything else around BCDR, like the BIAs, the planning, the BCDR testing, the tabletop exercises, stuff like that, because there's a lot of revenue that could be generated there. So just looking at some other ones before I close this out, what to include in a business continuity plan. That's the BC and BCDR, business continuity, data backup and recovery, mission critical systems, financial and operational assessments. So again, how is Datto or Axion or anything else going to provide an operational assessment or financial information? It's kind of important to understand. Alternate communications. Well, obviously that's going to be cell phones or maybe ham radio or something. Alternate physical locations, regulatory reporting. Like if you have an issue, how are you going to report to the regulators to say you have an issue to support them? And I bring this up because the regulators now, what's today, Saturday? Just yesterday, Silicon Valley Bank got taken over by the FDIC because they were basically going, under very quickly. In fact, they were going under so fast that the FDIC had to step in with only a few hours to spare in order to save a lot of money. And if I remember correctly, Roku had $500 million in Silicon Valley Bank. So it's kind of a big deal in relation to regulatory reporting. All right, and then we have communication with regulators and so on. So again, this is all stuff in relation to a business continuity plan. Obviously, this is for a financial company because FDIC, FINRA, FFIEC, that's not going to matter for a HIPAA environment or whatever. And then here we have, more into the FINRA side of things, kind of the same information. But the point is that there's much more than just a tool. You can't deploy a tool and say, oh, we have a complete BCDR solution in place, because you don't. And continuing to tell clients that you do is exposing you to risk that could result in a lawsuit that could put your company out of business, and it's not necessarily good. So, and again, I'm not saying that Datto is a bad solution. It's not. I'm not saying Axion's a bad solution. Personally, I like Axion over Datto. I think you should try to sell all of those any chance you get. But the reality of it is there's so much more to BCDR than just selling a tool to them or to the client, and it's kind of important that you understand that. And with that, I've gone on long enough and I've shown you the actual evidence from the federal side of things that will hold your clients accountable If you have any issues or questions or comments, then I certainly would suggest you reach out to me, and I'll be happy to respond. If you're actually interested in BCDR, like in the true form, then I'd suggest you look at ISO 22301 or maybe NIST 834. And again, we did talk about BCDR in episode 4 of our series. Super important to kind of understand this if you're offering BCDR services. Now, if you're a client that's looking for BCDR services, feel free to reach out. You can contact us at sales@arrakisconsulting.com, or you can reach out to us on our website. And with that, I thank everyone for the time you spent with me today, and I will talk to you later. See ya.